Tonight on the Daily Debrief, a baby dead, his father behind bars, his mother on trial.
Did you meet up with Cheyanne and have sex with her?
Yes.
Now it's sex and drugs, as experts explain the maggots found on the baby's body.
You know when a kid has a dirty diaper, if you can smell it, the flies can smell it way before you can.
This is the Daily Debrief for Friday, February 1st.
Good evening, everybody. On behalf of Michel Bryant, Marni Joe Snyder joining us remotely, and myself, welcome to the Debrief. First, it was depression, then it was drugs, now it's sex. Prosecutors are all over the misdeeds of an Iowa woman accused of neglecting her baby to the point the baby died. This case is the second to go to trial, involving the alleged murder of the infant Sterling Keene. A jury already convicted the little boy's father, Zachary. Now the mother, Cheyanne Harris, is facing a jury. The trial against Zachary ended in a conviction. Prosecutors tried him under an Iowa law which says endangering a baby to the point the baby dies is murder. Zachary Keene took the stand during his own trial and mostly blamed Cheyanne Harris for the son's death. Harris was the little boy's stay-at-home caretaker. Here, she was led into the court to hear the emotional testimony. The case has been a close copy of the case the state presented against Zachary. The same first responders again broke down on the stand, recalling the horrible condition of the body of the dead baby. At one point, the defendant herself appeared to leave the courtroom crying. In court today, prosecutors presented gruesome photos of the maggot-infested baby's corpse. The child was left to rot in his own feces. Harris could barely look. Her attorney, seated at center, did not appear to be happy either. Arms crossed, her back partially turned to her own client. What message is this body language sending to the jury? Testimony in this case moved toward the defendant's drug use. A friend of the father's said he used drugs with Cheyanne Harris, this defendant, but eventually it turned into something more.
Did you use meth with Miss Harris, the defendant, at that apartment the 3 times you were there?
No.
How many times did you use meth with her at the apartment?
Once for sure, possibly twice. I can't remember exactly.
Was that the only drug that you observed Miss Harris using at the apartment?
Yes.
And is the only location in that apartment where you smoked the methamphetamine in the bedroom shared by the defendant and Mr. Cohn?
Yes.
When you said you went to the apartment and you used drugs, you said that there were some drugs already in the apartment that you used, and maybe one time you brought drugs, correct?
Correct.
Do you know how Mr. Cohn and Miss Harris got the methamphetamines that they used?
No.
Do you know how they paid for the drugs that they were using?
No, I do not.
Did you get methamphetamine from Mr. Cohn?
At times, yes.
Did he pay you?
At times, yes.
That same witness testified that he didn't even know the couple had a baby, but that the daughter, Harris and Cohn, had together was healthy and happy.
When you were in that apartment, did you know there was a baby in that apartment?
No.
Did you ever see the door to that back bedroom open where not the parents' bedroom, but the other door?
Not that I can recall.
When you were at that apartment, did Miss Harris ever mention that there was a baby in that apartment?
Not that I recall 100%.
Did you ever see a baby in that apartment?
No.
Did you ever see anybody go in the back room and check on the baby?
I can't say for certain, but not that I can recall.
Did Nala appear healthy?
Yes.
Did she appear happy?
Yes.
Did she appear to be well nourished?
Yes.
And you said you saw Cheyanne actually prepare food and give it to Nala?
Yes.
Did Nala appear to be well nourished?
Yes.
Was she clean?
Yeah.
Properly clothed?
Yes.
Why was all of this happening? Why was this mother caring for one child and not the other? Maybe, just maybe, it's because she was attracted to the guy with whom she was doing drugs. Prosecutors made that link.
Did you have any type of romantic relationship with defendant Cheyanne Harris?
No.
After Sterling died, did you develop a relationship with her?
Yes.
How did that happen?
Just from texting back and forth, kind of. One thing led to another.
When did it happen?
Probably mid-September.
And was Ms. Harris still together with Mr. Cohn?
I believe so, yes.
Did you meet up with Cheyanne and have sex with her?
Yes.
More than once?
Yes.
Did Mr. Cohn know about it?
After the fact, yes, I believe so.
Did she make efforts to hide it from him before he found out?
I think so, yes.
How did he find out, Mr. Cohn?
I'm not sure.
After he found out, did he and Ms. Harris stay together?
I believe somewhat, yes.
Now, to be clear, your relationship with Ms. Harris continues to right now, right?
Yes.
How would you describe your current relationship with Ms. Harris?
Essentially the same as it was. Kind of much as it can be, I should say.
Now, you write and text her, right?
Correct.
Do you tell her in your writings and texts that you love her?
Yes.
Do you tell her that you want to be with her?
Yes.
Does she say that she loves you?
Yes.
And she wants to be with you?
Yes.
Do you exchange sexually explicit text messages with her?
And sustained.
Here's the state's case. The mother is doing drugs, leaving the baby to die in a puddle of his own feces. Then the mother, the defendant, starts having sex with the baby's father's druggy friend behind the father's back. Attorneys Michel Bryant and Marni Snyder are with me tonight. Michael, how did the case get this far?
You know, I have a feeling that had it not been for this intent element they're trying to negate, that this would have been resolved long ago with some sort of plea deal, some sort of sentence. But you know, this lady has nothing to lose. You know, why not just go into trial, fight it out, and let all the dirt fly? And it's flying.
Marni Snyder, should the judge have cut off some of that questioning about this sexcapade as character evidence, or are we looking at a possible threat of a motive here?
I think that a motive would be relevant to what they felt about each other before the death of baby Sterling. And then obviously there can be something that says they eventually did get together. I think what happened was the prosecutor went too far in talking about what their sex life might be now. Also, if she's in custody, the prosecutor might have gotten too close to allowing the jury to evaluate what her legal situation is now and start to speculate as to why she may or may not have bail. So I think that was the right call for the judge to say, all right, it's enough.
It has to end at some point. I agree with those. Those are good observations. Let's look at this one last time here. The body language from the defense attorney herself. We played it once. We've got to play it again here. What's going on here? The body language. This is key. Jurors can see this. The one defense counsel, seated at center, back to her own client, arms folded. I'll throw this on the table. Michel Bryant, is this sending a very negative message about one's own client to the jury?
Of course, and it has to be subconscious. I mean, clearly the defense attorney is not going to purposely paint the client in that light in front of the jury. But the fact is she did, and I'm sure she's hearing about it at the end of the day.
One can wonder. Look, let's move on here. The state's testimony reveals that this poor baby died malnourished and rotting while his mom was doing drugs. We talked about that. And then sleeping with the husband's druggy friend. Next on the witness stand, Child Protective Services.
Did you ask Ms. Harris, the defendant in this case, to explain why she believed Sterling had died on August 30th, 2017?
Yes, I talked with her about that.
And what did she tell you?
Her partner had indicated that the child had died from SIDS, and she agreed with that statement.
What is SIDS?
Sudden infant death syndrome.
And what did she tell you in response to you asking her to describe the events in the time leading up to Sterling's death?
She was not specific in times when she had last fed him or bathed him, is what I recall.
Did she say that she was the last one to see Sterling alive?
I believe that was discussed, and her partner indicated she was the last one to see him alive, and she did not disagree with that.
Was she able to describe how much and how often she had been feeding Sterling in the hours and days prior to his death?
She did offer that information to me, and it was very non-specific in the 24 hours, his last 24 hours of life.
Did you ask her how often Sterling was bathed?
Yes, I did.
And what was her response?
I recall her telling me about every 3 days.
Later, that caseworker said the father did not take her interview seriously, but the defendant did. Keep in mind, this interview with State Child Protective Services was several weeks after the baby died.
What was Mr. Cohn's demeanor?
He shared the same as Cheyanne. They were reluctant initially to commit to meeting with me that day.
Did he laugh during your interview with him?
During the interview, he did laugh.
Okay, and did you characterize him as being dismissive?
I did.
In contrast, Ms. Harris was tearful throughout the interview?
Yes, she was.
And during that interview, did she often apologize for Mr. Cohn's behavior?
She provided an explanation as to why he was laughing.
We never learned exactly what that explanation was. The Child Protective Services interview continued with questions about the defendant's drug use.
Did you inquire as to Ms. Harris's mental health needs?
Yes, I screened that when I asked the questions.
What do you mean you screened that?
We talk about any diagnoses that they have, or any concerns that they have with their mental health, or any medications that they may be taking.
Did she express to you or claim that she had any current symptoms of depression when you met with her on September 1st, 2017?
I don't recall her identifying specific symptoms, although her making a statement that she had depression.
And when she reported having a history of depression, did she say when that had occurred?
No, she did not.
When you screened Ms. Harris for her use of illegal drugs, did you ask her about her illegal drug use?
Yes, I did.
And what was her response?
It was learned through the interview that she used methamphetamine approximately 1 week before Sterling's death.
And the 1 week before Sterling's death time frame for using methamphetamines, who provided that time frame?
I believe Cheyanne did.
And did she tell you how it was that she ingested the methamphetamine?
I believe this discussion was that she had smoked it.
During a recorded police interview, the defendant admitted her use of drugs.
Any self-medication like marijuana, methamphetamine, anything like that?
I did.
Okay.
Honestly, I did. Before I met Zach, I was really, really hard in the pot.
Okay.
But when I met Zach, he opened my eyes to the fact that I was just making my depression worse.
Okay.
And then I have tried methamphetamine. But
how long ago was that?
really not that long ago. Within the time that I've had Sterling.
Okay. Okay. Is there any meth at the house?
No.
How did you try it?
Smoked it.
Give me a ballpark of the last time that you would have smoked meth.
It hasn't been enough.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that for...
No, I mean, since we moved to...
Okay, sure.
That's part of the reason we got away from high school is because we knew too many people.
Let's go back to the panel for this one. Marni Jo Snyder, Michel Bryant. Let's talk about some of what the defense said during opening statements here, Marni Jo. The defense said very briefly in about a minute-long opening that this defendant is not a monster. Do those words still ring true for the jury?
I think that they can. I think that you have to argue that a bad parent is not a monster. There are reasons for that. A monster is someone who wants their child to die in that swing. And that's exactly what they're going to try and prove, is that the intention was never that and the causation wasn't her willful neglect. They have to point the finger at that.
So, Michel Bryant, in order to get there, it would seem that the defense really needs to play this drug use as a pretty serious issue. But we heard a lot of witnesses say, look, she was lucid. She was taking care of the other child. She was taking care of the dog. If she's taking care of them, then why the target on this child?
Yeah, I think that's the defense's biggest problem, because they have to argue that, you know, she could take care of one but not the other, and yet that wasn't intentional. How could you be negligent in taking care of one child and not the other? I think that's a tough call.
This will be an interesting defense case trying to say she's not a monster. Depression, drugs, the death of this one child. That's where the defense is trying to go with this. Still ahead tonight, here on the Daily Debrief, more testimony in the case of the accused infant killer Cheyanne Harris, the stomach-churning autopsy photos. We won't show them, but you'll hear about some of what authorities uncovered. And again, look at that body language. That is when the Debrief continues. To the Debrief, ladies and gentlemen. Testimony is on hold until next Wednesday in the case of a California man accused of murdering a family of 4. Defendant Charles Merritt could face the death penalty if convicted in the killings of his business associate, Joseph McStay, McStay's wife, Summer, on the left, and the 2 McStay boys. First, the McStays disappeared. Then authorities said they may have fled to Mexico, to avoid debts. But the authorities backtracked. It turned out the entire family was buried in the Mojave Desert. Prosecutors charged the defendant, saying he killed that family for money. Now back to the case of an alleged Iowa meth mommy who's accused of murdering her infant son. Gruesome testimony today from experts who had to examine the child's remains.
So with the full writer, you would say he could have been dead for up to 8 hours?
Yes.
You didn't see any of that bloating and things like that, but we've heard testimony about maggots, and I think a lot of people, when they hear maggots, you think of something dead.
Yes.
So how do you explain that?
So, yes, typically we quite often in our office have bodies that come to our office and we observe maggots on the body. And the bodies at that time are in a moderate stage of decomposition, so they're really darkened, they're bloating. So oftentimes the person isn't even recognizable because they're in that stage of decomposition. That was not the case with Sterling. So maggots are usually going to occur when flies identify dead tissue. So there was, you had feces, which is possible that could have attracted flies. And then you also had dead tissue around the diaper area, and maggots can also feed on dead tissue as well.
Another expert took the stand and talked about the maggots found in the baby's diaper.
The feces, urine soaking, and then that kind of the extreme diaper rash could have been attractive. Any of the 3 could have been an attraction to those flies, and they're going to try to gain access. For the flies to lay eggs, they have to be able to get to it, because they're not just going to dump out eggs somewhere and hope that their maggots crawl to it. So there's going to be a period of time where the flies are crawling into the area, trying to get access to that diaper area.
How long would Sterling have needed to be in that dirty diaper before that attraction started?
Well, the attraction can certainly start right away, because anybody who's ever been around little kids, you know when a kid has a dirty diaper. If you can smell it, the flies can smell it way before you can. And so that would be enough of an attraction for the flies to say, hey, there's a spot I can lay eggs. But for the flies to actually get to that area would have taken some more time. Diapers of course, are designed to keep all of that stuff in, right? That's why we buy diapers. And so that's going to provide a pretty extreme barrier for the flies to gain access, and it's going to take them some time to defeat those barriers.
And how do they do that?
Well, they can certainly smell it, and then once they can smell that attraction, they look for just about any way they can to get into there.
Let's go back one last time to Michel Bryant, Marni Jo Snyder here. Really hard to listen to this testimony, Michael.
It's gruesome. It's gruesome stuff. But if you cut through all of that, the key is anybody can relate to, shooing a fly away. They don't like to land on you, and if they're being bothered. How still, quiet, and calm does a little baby have to be for these flies to take up residence, lay eggs? Eggs turn into maggots. I think it reinforces for the jury the neglect element of this case.
Exactly. Marni Jo Snyder, we're hearing that infant was probably dead for about 8 hours. Certainly the prosecution on closing is going to tie that together with the defendant's statements about when she claimed the child was last alive.
Right. I mean, and the defense has to get through all of her different statements and interviews in order to prove that the neglect, they're almost trying to prove the neglect was worse in this case, that she could not parent and therefore it could not be her fault. So really uphill battle when you hear this testimony that sets this timeline using scientific evidence and records of different experiments. It's really hard to get over 8 to 12 hours or 8 to 12 days of not having changed this baby's diaper and taken care of him.
I get that, Marni Jo, but here's the thing. I mean, we hear all this testimony that the mother, the defendant here in this case, was up and about. She was taking care of the other children. People who saw her that morning didn't think she looked like she was out of it. She didn't look like she was on drugs. So it's going to be hard to try to get over that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to finding out whether or not they're going to call an expert to talk about postpartum depression. Because I think that when we hear drug addiction, we think that would affect both those children equally if their mom was addicted to drugs. I'm interested to see whether an expert in postpartum depression can tell us a little bit more about that picking and choosing that we seem to see and whether or not that had anything to do with it.
Exactly, and I'm expecting that. Michel Bryant, we're only hearing half of the case thus far. We know there's another half coming up.
That's right, and I can't wait to see if both the defendant takes a stand and the boyfriend already convicted may take the stand. It's going to be a wild week next week.
Oh, yeah, certainly. We will keep on this case along with the McStay case when it picks up next week and all the other legal developments happening. Marni Jo Snyder, Michel Bryant, appreciate your insight here on The Debrief.
Thank you.
And thanks a lot for watching, ladies and gentlemen, for The Debrief tonight. I'll see you back here on The Debrief at either 4 or 5 o'clock on the Law&Crime Network. Our schedule here depends on testimony in that McStay family murder case. Tonight there's no live testimony. We will see you back here at 9 o'clock Eastern on Monday morning. Have a good night and a good weekend from all of us here at Law&Crime.